Yak-9UT is a Soviet fighter that attracted my attention because it has multiple cannon configurations. While it's not unusual for planes to be able to equip different autocannons, there are not many aircraft that have significantly bigger than usual cannons, and there are even less examples where such weaponry could be equipped on a single-engine plane that is nimble enough to outmaneuver many of its foes. This plane is exactly that. A good dogfighter capable to one-shot the biggest planes or fight heavy tanks if you choose so. This plane has three main armament options. The default setup is two 20 and one 23mm autocannons, which is nothing special. The majority of fighters have somewhat similar amount or caliber cannons. Another setup replaces the biggest cannon into a 37mm one, which is something special, but not extraordinary. The 37mm gun allows you to one-shot most fighters or penetrate tanks' roofs if you take the armor-piercing belt. While the last setup has the least amount of guns, only two, but one of them becomes a 45mm autocannon. There are a very small number of planes in War Thunder that could carry something like that. In this video, I will share my impressions of playing Yak-9UT in ground realistic battles, of course using the setup with the biggest possible cannon. Since the 45mm cannon has the armor-piercing belt and I only fly planes in ground realistic battles, at first I wanted to use this plane as a tank hunter. AP belt looked quite promising. Despite being the only option that increases respawn point cost, projectiles penetration of up to 79mm allows you to easily penetrate roof armor of pretty much every tank in the game. Since I already played Yak-9UT with 37mm cannon and was disappointed with the post-penetration damage, I hope that this 45mm gun that shoots twice heavier shells will deal more damage. But the first flight disappointed me more than finding out that the Santa is not real. Despite the size, I didn't felt a big difference in post-penetration damage. If I was able to knock out two crew members during one attack, it was a very successful attack. Most of the time, completely destroying a tank with these rounds required hitting it many times until there are no crew left. And the less crew left, the more difficult it becomes to hit the remaining ones, as it's quite hard to pinpoint their exact location on a target that from a few hundred meters is just a few pixels in size. It turned out that using this belt is just impractical, as I had to spend too much time and use too many rounds to deal with one target, which is not very convenient when you have only 29 rounds for this cannon and every moment an enemy plane can interrupt your disgraceful activity. My disappointment was immeasurable and the day was ruined, so I switched to the belt for air targets, hoping that at least I'll get some air kills since this plane is a good turn fighter. But soon I found out that probably these rounds are a better choice overall, since in addition to air kills, I was able to deal with certain ground vehicles as well. If the opponent's vehicle has no roof, only a few or in some cases one hit inside the crew compartment is enough to completely destroy it. 80 grams of TNT equivalent of explosives in these shells distribute the damage all around the hit area, which is way more convenient than trying to snipe each individual crew member from a moving plane from a big distance. Of course, air targets belt significantly limits what vehicles can be attacked. Everything with roof armor will be impossible to damage, but at the same time, the attacks against squishy vehicles are way more effective and no longer feel like a waste of time. The only downside is that many of the open-top vehicles will be SPAAs, so attacking them can be risky. On a good note, these same rounds are very effective against planes. I guess this is why the belt is called an ammunition belt for air targets. Hitting an average single-engine fighter with one 45mm round will be a one-shot kill in most cases. Bigger planes are one-shot at less, approximately half of the time, but the damage of the first hit usually leaves the plane crippled, an easy target, unable to fight back and just waiting to be finished off. Even with my poor flying skills and a habit to randomly crash into the ground, I was able to easily win dogfights against other planes, as Yak's maneuverability allows to confidently stay on their 6, especially since people in ground realistic battles prefer to use heavier aircraft to carry more bombs. The 45mm cannon overheats way faster than smaller caliber autocannons. After a short burst, the dispersion becomes absolutely insane, and there is a high probability that the gun will jam. The most success I had is when shooting no more than 2 or 3 rounds at once. Luckily, the cannon cools down as quickly as it overheats. The plane has some basic armor such as armored glass, steel plates, and self-sealing fuel tanks, but I'm not sure if those are very useful at battle rating 5.7, where most fighters and SPAs already have so much firepower. And since smaller caliber cannons already have enough firepower, the essential question arises: is it even worth it to use a 45mm gun instead of a bigger number of smaller autocannons? If you value consistency, probably no. Bigger cannon is a high-risk, high-reward type of weapon. Hit or miss, quite literally. You can successfully take down planes and open-top ground vehicles with the most common 20mm autocannons or even high-caliber machine guns. The only 2 advantages the big cannon offers is that you can equip armor-piercing rounds and deal with armored tanks despite carrying no bombs, and probably the most important one, satisfaction that you will experience after hitting something with a big, high-explosive round. I would rate the Yak-9UT 6.5, something written in small letters, out of 10. It's a very good fighter, able to outmaneuver most planes, and a 45mm cannon is much more fun to use than regular autocannons. I would primarily use this plane because it offers some diversion. Almost all planes have average-sized cannons, and after a while the combat becomes too predictable and boring, while aircraft such as Yak-9UT is one of a very few able to carry such a big gun, which makes the gameplay feel noticeably different. And for those of you who are still watching this video, I have this very suspicious YouTube channel with strangely familiar dude talking about other games.